So hello friends, today we'll be studying regulation of cardiac output, which is a very important topic for NEET PG and INI-CET examination and a hot topic for the professional examinations and especially the Viva portion. So regulation of cardiac output, as we have seen in the previous video, that cardiac output is nothing but stroke volume and heart rate, their product. Alright. So if I want to regulate my cardiac output, the only thing that I need to do is I have to manipulate the stroke volume or heart rate. So let us see. Stroke volume. It can be changed in three ways, that are preload, afterload, and myocardial contractility. So preload. What is preload? Preload, it is basically the measure of EDV, end diastolic volume of the heart. Suppose this is my heart. Okay. So at the end of diastole, how much blood is being poured into my heart? That is my end diastolic volume. I have explained it in detail in my previous video. So preload is basically my end diastolic volume. The amount to which myocardium is stretched before the contraction starts. Before systole has begun, the amount of blood that is present in the heart, if there is more blood in the heart will be more expanded. So the amount to which myocardium is stretched before the contraction starts, it is called as end diastolic, it is called as preload, which is another way of saying end diastolic volume. So how does my end diastolic volume is going to affect preload? Is going to affect here stroke volume. Okay, so here a phenomenon comes that is called Frank-Starling law. So what Frank-Starling law states is, suppose this is the length of myocardium and this is force of contraction. So up to a physiological limit, this is the physiological limit, up to the physiological limit, that means this portion here, force of contraction is proportional to length of myocardium. I hope you get this much. It is for case of a single myocardium, but when we consider the whole heart, then the length of myocardium can be replaced with volume of myocardium. Not volume of myocardium, the volume of heart. The volume of heart and force of contraction is the force during systole. And the more the force of contraction, the more will be the systolic volume. Sorry, the stroke volume. And the less will be end systolic volume. I hope it is clear till here. Yes. So why did I say up to physiological limit? See, what happens is, when suppose this is my myofibril, okay, Z line, these are my actin filaments, and these are my myosin filaments. When the length is increasing, the number of cross bridges that can be formed, it also increases up to the physiological limit. So the force of contraction will definitely be higher. But after the physiological limit, what happens is, see, this is up to the physiological limit. See, the number of cross bridges that can be formed, it will be increased when the size of myocardium is increased. Now, suppose it is increased beyond the physiological limit, then myosin filaments will be pulled apart. See, now no cross bridges can be formed. So this is my Frank-Starling law. Okay. So after that, let us move to the next topic, that is afterload. So here we can say, just a second, cardiac output is directly proportional to stroke volume, that is directly proportional to preload. The more the preload, that means more end diastolic volume. More the end diastolic volume means more stroke volume, and this means greater ejection fraction. Okay. Afterwards, moving forward, there is afterload. Afterload is load that is beared by heart when contraction is happening. When my heart is pumping blood, at that time, the force that my ventricles have to put so as the blood moves out of aorta, that is referred to as afterload. What will that load be? What would that load be? That will be actually, afterload is nothing but my total peripheral resistance. Okay. Total peripheral resistance. Afterload, therefore, it is dependent on, so I don't think I have to explain it much. Stroke volume will be inversely proportional to afterload. I have a 1 kilogram of weight, and I have 100 kilogram of weight. Obviously, I'll be able to lift 1 kilogram with more ease. I'll be able to lift 1 kilogram of weight till suppose 100 meter. then I'll be able to pull it up to 1 meter only, na. So that is the thing. It will stroke volume is inversely proportional to afterload. Now, what are afterload? What are the parameters that affect our afterload? Total peripheral resistance. It is dependent on vessel diameter. Strictly speaking of the diameter of arterioles. Alright. And blood viscosity. So you have heard that the people who are anemic, their blood viscosity is low. Blood viscosity is low in people who are anemic because there is less number of RBCs in them. So the blood viscosity is low. That means the total peripheral resistance would be low. Afterload is low. So stroke volume is much higher in those people. Okay, that means cardiac output in people who are anemic people is generally greater than what you expect. Moving on to the topic, that is myocardial contractility. Myocardial contractility. Just a second. Now there is a very good table given in genome, or rather I'd say flow chart, that there are few things that affect myocardial contractility. I'll be explaining each one of them. So first of all, the heart muscle, they have two receptors, beta 1 adrenergic receptors and M2 cholinergic receptors. Beta 1 adrenergic receptors, as you all must be knowing, it can bind to both norepinephrine as well as epinephrine. So myocardial contractility can be increased by both circulating catecholamines as well as the sympathetic stimulation. Mind you one thing, that M2 cholinergic receptors, they are present in mostly the nodal tissues like SA node and AV node. So they are having the vagal fibers, they are having only chronotropic effect on heart, whereas these beta 1 adrenergic have both cholinergic as well as both chronotropic as well as inotropic action. Chronotropic means action, the thing that is happening to its frequency, and inotropic is the thing that is happening to its strength of contraction. So even if I'm giving vagal stimulation, the strength of contraction will not reduce. But when I'm giving beta 1 adrenergic, but when I'm stimulating beta 1 adrenergic receptors, the it is affecting both. That is, it will both increase my heart rate and it will increase my strength of contraction. That is why whenever I give beta blockers, like metoprolol and all, what it does, it both reduces the heart rate and it lowers the strength of contraction. That is, it lowers the stroke volume, therefore lowering overall cardiac output, which is another way of saying it reduces my blood pressure. Okay, this much is being said. Now let us move to other topics. Now there are few drugs like digitalis. Digitalis, what it does is it is an inhibitor of sodium potassium ATPase. Now what is the function of digitalis? It is positive inotropic and negative dromotropic. Dromotropic is related to conduction speed. Okay, so digitalis is positive inotropic. Now its mechanism of action is, suppose this is my cardiac muscle. Here is NAK ATPase, which is an example of primary active transport. And here is Na calcium. So see, here what happens is potassium moves inside and sodium moves outside. So what it does, sodium comes inside and calcium is so it is sodium calcium exchanger, or more correct would be saying 3 sodium and 1 calcium exchanger. Now this is an example of secondary active transport. Yeah. Now what happens, this NAK ATPase is responsible for maintaining the gradient of sodium. That means sodium concentration, let me draw it here, sodium concentration in the ECF is more and sodium concentration in the ICF is less. So what will be the natural tendency of sodium to move? It will be to move from ECF to ICF. So this will help in the movement of calcium ions from inside the cell to outside the cell against its concentration gradient. Calcium is more in ECF and calcium is less in ICF. Okay, so when this NAK ATPase is inhibited, this gradient, this will be lost. That means this secondary active transport will also be seized and the intracellular calcium ion concentration will increase. increased calcium ion concentration means increased strength of contraction. Okay. There are a few other things like hypoxia, hypoxia, hypercapnia, and acidosis. Under these conditions, myocardial contractility lowers. Again, there is one more important concept, that is force frequency relationship. It states that when the frequency of contraction is increased, the force of contraction is also increased. Okay. So these are the things that affect myocardial contractility. So with this, we have come to an end with the factors that affect stroke volume. Now, heart rate. It is actually simple. Heart rate, I have already explained. Sympathetic stimulation increase, vagal stimulation, that means heart rate will decrease. Now, just a second. Cardiac output will increase only when heart rate will be up to 180 beats per minute. When it overshoots this value, cardiac output will lower. The reason being, when the heart rate is low, it will give enough time for my ventricles to fill up so that the blood can be pumped into the aorta. When the heart rate starts to increase, although the amount of blood that comes into my heart or into my ventricles is lesser as compared to the initial value, the total HR into stroke volume, this term is greater. Okay, but when the heart rate exceeds this number, that is 180 beats per minute, stroke volume reduces drastically because the end diastolic volume will be low. There will be low diastolic time. Okay, so when the EDV will be less, obviously stroke volume will be less as well. So it will affect my heart rate as well. So I think with this we come to an end of this topic. I hope you have liked the video. After this, I am thinking of covering topics like regulation of blood pressure. It will be coming soon. Hope to see you then. Goodbye.